In 2012, a survey of 4,000 respondents found that British people rated Scouse, the accent of Liverpool, as the least intelligent and least trustworthy. What? How is that possible? Scouse is the accent of the Beatles, for God's sake. Now, if you're not familiar with Scouse, here's an example.
I mean, good God, I don't need you. I've got a room full of books. I know what wine to buy, what clothes to wear, what plays to see, what papers and books to read, and I can do it without you.
Sounds good to me. I'll reveal more from this survey later in this video. Today on Let Them Talk TV, we're going to look at accent prejudice or accentism in the UK. And I should tell you that I myself have been the subject of accentism on this channel. Look at this comment on a recent video I made called Why You Shouldn't Speak English Like a Native. You can check out the video up here if you haven't seen it already. He's discussing pronunciation, then I cringe when he pronounces however as however and culture as culture, Terminator. Yes, that's true. I have a slight London accent because I'm from London. So I do say however and not however. But why do you cringe because I have a mild regional accent? Why should this be a source of distress and dismay to you, the writer of the comment? Does this person cringe at all regional pronunciations or just mine? And what about this on a video I made on Cockney, that is the strong London accent? Worship of the stupid now. They hit Cockney with good reason. Lowest society is celebrated now, just like low-life rappers who only know 50 words total of English. Or this one. I'm so glad that I grew up educated and didn't learn this disgrace to our language. It makes us sound stupid. It's ironic because his comment really shows how uneducated he is, how ignorant he is. The real disgrace is accent prejudice, and unfortunately it still exists in the UK. First of all, let's talk about standard British English for a moment, sometimes referred to as RP, received pronunciation. Now, I don't like the term RP, but I discussed that in another video here. For the purposes of this video, I'll call standard British English RP. Now, all the dictionaries and English teaching material use RP as the standard when they're doing British English, and that's fine. We need a standard. And if you're speaking to someone who is not from your region or one whose first language is not English, you will reduce the number of slang words and dialect expressions that you use. That's normal, so you can all understand each other. But keeping your accent is fine. Britain is rich and diverse in its accents. There are something like 40 different accents in the UK. And yes, it reveals the rich diversity and history of the language, and it should be celebrated. Now, there are still those who believe that if you're uneducated, you speak with a regional accent, but as you get educated, this accent miraculously disappears and you acquire an RP accent. A small number of people do, for one reason or another, actively seek to reduce their regional accent, and for reasons we'll go into in a moment. But for the vast majority, that's the accent of the towns and the cities that they grew up in, and they're rightly proud of it. It's part of their identity. Just because you don't speak the standard version of something, it doesn't mean it's bad. In ancient times, some speakers of Latin complained of the bastardization of pure Latin, because on the street they were speaking vulgar Latin or popular Latin, and these dialects became Italian and French and other Romance languages. Accents are like flavours of ice cream. You may have a preference for one or another, but you can't say one is better. I like pistachio, but if you prefer strawberry, then power to you. It's the same with accents. The phonemes are different, but they are just sounds. You can't say that one sound is better than another. Personally, I like the Birmingham accent. I lived in Birmingham for a while and I always enjoyed the sing-song rhythm of Brummie. That's my pistachio. But to ascribe intelligence or trust or give someone a job or a position of authority or not give them one just based on the accent is unacceptable. Is this any better than racism, sexism, or any other form of prejudice? I don't think so. Now, fortunately, things have changed over time and there have been improvements in Britain. Accentism is far less institutionalised as it used to be. Before the 1960s, if you wanted to work in the civil service, in the BBC, or in a number of professions, it would be a lot easier if you spoke RP. And if you watch those old newsreels from the BBC, you would never hear or rarely hear a regional accent. You would sound something like this.
Armed thieves hijacked a van in East London and stole £4 million worth of silver ingots. The Common Market Summit, which was due to open in Brussels next Monday, has been postponed for several weeks. A man has been arrested after the explosion which destroyed the Italian consulate in London.
Thankfully, nowadays, there are a lot of presenters on the BBC and elsewhere with regional accents, and you can go to Oxford or Cambridge or work in any profession with a regional accent. But this does not mean that prejudice doesn't still exist, because it does. Look at this quote. A degree from an elite university acts as a signal for quality, but other characteristics such as personal style, accents and mannerisms, adaptability, teamworking and other soft skills are then interpreted as proxies for talent. So accent still important. So having a regional accent at an elite university is fine, but these graduates can still face prejudice in the job market. Now, back in the day, what would you do if you had a regional accent and you wanted to rise the social ranks? You try and lose it, or rather acquire an RP accent. Margaret Thatcher was from Lincolnshire, but she lost most of the traces of her regional accent when she became Prime Minister, or before she became Prime Minister. Listen to this from the musician Sting. I lost my accent because I didn't want to be judged. At the time, regional accents were not accepted at all. I'd watch the news every night and the newsreaders didn't speak like Geordies. I thought, I'll develop that and not be identified with a particular region. Sting spoke those words in 2013. Exactly 100 years earlier, in 1913, George Bernard Shaw wrote in the preface to his play Pygmalion, "It's impossible for an Englishman to open his mouth without making some other Englishman despise him." If you don't know the story of Pygmalion, which was later made into the movie My Fair Lady, it's the story of a London flower girl with a strong Cockney accent, and she realizes that if she wants to escape poverty, she needs a better accent, and Professor Higgins is charged with the task of teaching her to talk proper, like a lady.
I'm come to have lessons, I am, and to pay for them too, make no mistake.
Well, I say, Pickering, shall we ask this object to sit down, or shall we throw her out of the window?
I won't be called an object when I've offered to pay like any lady.
What is it you want, my dear?
I want to be a lady in a flower shop, instead of selling in Piccadilly Circus. They won't take me unless I can talk more genteel. Well, he said he could teach me.
Certainly things have changed since the time of Eliza Doolittle. Social classes are more fluid now. Having said that, although it's more difficult than in the past, you can often tell someone's class by their accent. Let's go back to the survey I mentioned at the start. I want to show you some stats that you might find surprising. As we said at the beginning of the video, according to the survey in the UK, the least trusted accent is the Scouse accent, which is from Liverpool. Second bottom of the pile is the West Midlands accent, or the Brummy accent. And here's an example.
It's just Americans.
Yeah.
It's Americans love the idea of watching British people do something objectively silly.
Yeah.
And celebrating a royal wedding is silly because the royal family is, at its very essence, a very silly thing.
And next from bottom is Cockney. Sounds like this.
First time you walk into a public place and everybody in that place knows who you are and you don't know a soul. Now, I can imagine like a lot of people actually think, oh, hold up, back off, and that is never going to happen to me again. And they sort of isolate themselves. Well, with me, it was a question of, I've always liked people, you know, and because I didn't know anybody, didn't mean to say I didn't want to know anybody, so I was in there like a flash.
Top of the pile, yes, you guessed it, it's RP. So let's have a look example.
Well, first from Oxford, and he said, right, you need her at Bletchley, and it still took her 2 years. She went in initially as a secretary, and it took her 2 years, even though she'd been brought in, they wouldn't accept that she should be in the room, and it took her 2 years to get in there. And then once she was in the room that she, should have been in, she was paid a fraction of what the men were paid.
So it's estimated that only 3% of the British population speak a pure RP. Most people will have a regional accent in one form or another. Maybe a mild regional accent, such as me from London, or sometimes a very strong regional accent. But it's more complicated than you think. Also near the top are the Scottish accents. Here's an example.
Oh, I see. Not guilty.
Fine. Off the record, the police have told me that the USB drive does have Simon's prints on it, and that in searching the flat they found the mobile that the bank details were sent from.
And the Geordie accent from Newcastle.
Yeah. And that's why we wanted to do it. 30 years ago when we started out, we were both given an amazing opportunity, and that led to this fantastic career that we've had, and we're very, very grateful for it. But we were two quite normal, unremarkable kids from the West End of Newcastle, and we were given an opportunity, and we grabbed it with both hands.
Yeah.
This explains why some companies set up call centres in areas with more trusted accents. Not everything is so gloomy. Society has moved on, and regional accents are now a source of pride, not shame. And most people are wise enough to recognise that a regional accent says nothing about intelligence or ability or education. And a Londoner can understand a Scouser, and a Geordie can understand a West Country accent without any difficulty. I'm from London, but I've lived in Leeds and Birmingham, and I've spent time in Scotland as well. I've never encountered any difficulties understanding or being understood. So let's not talk about good accents and bad accents. Some people are smart, some people are stupid, but it's all about the words you use, the words that come out of your mouth, and everything else is irrelevant. You can speak good English, you can speak bad English, but it's all in what you say that counts, not which phonemes, which sounds you use. Now that's the situation in the UK, but what about in your country? Does accentism exist there too? And if you are from the UK, have you ever been the victim of accent prejudice? Let us know your thoughts and your comments below. See you next time. Bye.